Good evening, everyone. My name is L.Dudley, and tonight we'll be discussing the 3 video presentations and correlating counseling styles. And so to begin, I think that all 3 videos were quite what I would imagine counseling would be. My wife and I are currently in maintenance counseling for our marriage, and so these are some of the examples. I actually see my therapist or counselor in all 3 of these counselors, and so it's quite what I imagined it would be. And so some of the differences, well, let's start with the similarities. I think some of the similarities were all 3 were very engaged. I think that the distance between the therapist or the counselor and the client was shown to be very well. It wasn't too much distance in between. I definitely could see that there was nothing in between the therapist and the client, so there was nothing blocking, so it didn't feel as if the counselor or the therapist was sitting behind a desk, and it was a subservient type of flow. And so I definitely could see that all 3 of them used some summarizing. They definitely used some reflective statements. And so I think that those are some of the similarities that I saw within the 3 counselors. Some of the differences that I saw, one that really stood out to me was Counselor 3. I think Counselor 3 for me was one of the, for lack of a better term, better counselors, simply because I believe his question line was more open-ended, and it was more about trying to allow the client to connect some of the dots and get some pieces out. He didn't really summarize a lot, but it was more so about engaging particular systematic thinking and why they were thinking that particular way and what brought them to those particular thoughts. And so with the first counselor, it seemed as if he was really ready to surmise what he was saying, but then he was like, there were points that he wanted to bring out, which I think there were some pieces within that first counseling session that were missed that I think would have been vital or helpful to the client. And so in the second portion, I feel as if the young lady that was counseling, I feel as if her summarizations kind of put words in the client's mouth, so to speak. I think they were more closed questions. I definitely like how she said, can you talk more about? I like that statement. I like that approach. And so I think that's something that I would definitely incorporate in my counseling, is to, talk more about, whatever the subject is, so that you can help the client connect the dots and get to some deeper systematic thinking and how they arrived to some of their conclusions, rather than just being ready to fire off with your own thoughts as the therapist, or what you believe as the therapist, because again, this session is all about them. And so one question that I definitely would have for my professor is, because we come in with our own views, our own values, our own thoughts, and then even from hearing some of the client's thoughts and perceptions, and I think sometimes we're ready to fire back and say, oh, well, what about this? Oh, but I heard you say this, but what about this? How do you combat that particular component